Welcome to the Pinocchio Project. I'm your host, Mitch Friedman. And today I want to have a conversation around trans. And you're going, oh no, this is a topic that we spend so much time in and so much emotional investment in, and there's so much tragedy and confusion around the trans word. I agree there is. Today it's going to be a different suffix after trans, although actually trans is the prefix and the noun is the main thing. So what we're not talking about today is transgender ideology or policymaking or a cultural Kool-Aid. We're not talking about transgender policymaking ideology or cultural Kool-Aid. It may be new to you, or maybe even something you've heard in the past couple of years, but dismissed it as science fiction. But the trans we're going to discuss today is transhumanism. Transhumanism. So literally, if you know what that word should mean, that compound word, trans, it means beyond or past or advancing to another degree. It means that humanism should be advancing beyond basic humanism that we understand it. It's an advancement or a transcending of humanism. And it's a very popular in scientific, sociological, and really philosophical circles as well. But even the discussion of it is fraught with irony. I don't know if you know what irony is. Irony is a statement of one thing when another thing is actually reliable. And it's ludicrous on its face. So let me give you an example of irony. Irony, for example, is, hey, did you read the headlines or did you see the news feed? The police station was burglarized. That's ironic. Also in the same vein, the fire station burned down. That's ironic. How about this one? Marriage counselor files for divorce. That's ironic. It's something that should never happen and has now happened. It is something that is set and reliable that's now been turned on its head. Here's a final one for your consideration. If you're a long-suffering professional football fan in the state of Texas or maybe elsewhere, this is ironic. Cowboys win Super Bowl. Still waiting for that one after all these decades. So my thesis here on the Pinocchio Project episode today is that any conversation from the camps that hold tightly to the development of transhumanist technology is actually fraught with irony, and I'll get to that in a minute. So let me define simply what transhumanism is. Transhumanism is the belief or theory that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. The belief or theory that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. So even that definition is fraught, I guess that's my word of the episode, is pregnant with irony. If you understand what an ideological commitment is, or a worldview commitment as to evolution. Evolution as a worldview commitment literally means that what it means to be human is purely accidental. We are accidents. And as you know, the most important question that you can ask as you construct your worldview that leads to healthy living or flourishing is to answer properly the question, what does it mean to be human? And the evolutionary proposition is that humanity is simply random chance over time, undirected, without any intelligence. And what this definition holds, and I didn't just make up this definition, is that the things that are accidental about who we are must be aided or boosted by means of things that are intelligent and intentional, science and technology. There's all kinds of irony, even in the fact that we can have science that can be relied on and technology that we can rely on. I don't want to drive us in the ground necessarily, but one of the pillars of a functional worldview is that it must be logically consistent. It must adhere together with all the internal statements of commitment. And for someone who holds to an atheistic or materialistic or evolutionary proposition about how life began and how human beings are now in existence, purely undirected, is ironic when it comes to a statement that we can develop ideas that can be reliable and can be coherent and can be on purpose based in our intelligence. Because an evolutionary understanding, if you consider it honestly, is that we shouldn't rely on anything that our brains tell us or our consciousness proposes to us, because there's nothing intentional about our consciousness in the first place. It has no purpose. It has no design. And therefore, we look around and we should be able to surmise just from logical consistency that because we do have reliable scientific propositions that are empirical and reproducible, and we do have technology that can mostly be counted on, any idea that we came from a lack of intelligence or accidental undirected processes should be dismissed out of hand, because accidental processes and random undirected consciousness shouldn't be able to create a purposeful, designed, intelligent technology and scientific proposition. That on its face is illogical. It's almost like saying, just in the evolutionary model, the origin of life, which will never be attested to scientifically in an evolutionary model, is that something came out of nothing, meaning what's organic and living came out of things that are not living. The inorganic somehow became organic. And I'm spending a lot of time here because one of the ways that you should be equipped in identifying worldviews that are not reliable, worldview commitments that are illogical or non-factual or unlivable, is to just examine them at the very foundation for their logical consistency. So the first irony is the understanding that evolution could somehow be molded into an intelligent system of science and technology that's now helpful to the human race. And so that's true in almost every category. Just what it means to be human, if we're rooted in evolutionary biology, that means that I can't count on anything that I think, because it's not by design or purpose that I have these capacities. It's purely accidental. So that's the first irony, and that irony is true across the board when you compare evolutionary understandings of consciousness versus intelligent design capacities and capabilities of consciousness. An intelligent designer can design me with purpose and give me responsibilities and capabilities that now allow me to create with intelligence, with reason, with reliability. So, all right, so here is a breakdown of some of the propositions of transhumanism. So transhumanism, again, is that the human race can and literally must evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. And this movement is gaining all kinds of momentum. Some of it's rooted in artificial intelligence. Some of it's rooted in artificial intelligence now married with developing technologies in human longevity. And you'll be hearing and reading and watching more and more about it in the weeks and months and years to come, I'm sure. This is the proof that we're made in the image of God, because we all have this need to live beyond what we're experiencing right now. We have this yearning, and that's another irony. I'll get to that in a minute. So, human evolution, according to transhumanism, must be given a boost by intelligent designers. So the thing that is not designed must be given a boost by the people who are the intelligent designers. So the humans who are random must now intelligently give humanity a boost beyond our current capacities, longevities, and wellness and capabilities. So one of the propositions of transhumanism is that aging must be eradicated. Aging toward ultimate death is a disease that shouldn't be allowed to exist. So just like cancer, just like all kind of debilitating diseases like MS, all the things that slowly rob the human body of its capacity to operate and then ultimately can lead toward death. Aging is the ultimate exclamation point to our lives, because if we live long enough, we will live no more in this natural body. And so transhumanism says that won't be the case in 100 years. We're going to fix that. And this is how it's going to be fixed. One is advances in medicine, which we're all for. We want medicine to advance. The proposition for transhumanism is that when you merge science and technology in the medical field, you can actually come up with not just ways to keep aging at its current form. Like for me, it's not just that I can stay at this age with this amount of wear and tear and I would erosion in my body. Aging should probably also be reversed due to the integration of science and technology in the medical field. And, I think we're all in favor of using what God gave us as a creative potential to advance medicine for sure. Now, where we kind of go off the rails is in transhumanism is that really ironically, another way, and really I think for transhumanists, as I read across the spectrum of what they're proposing, is that the ultimate defeat of aging won't even include our bodies. Our bodies must be done away with, and that this is called whole brain emulation or mind uploading. And what this means is we get to the point where scientifically and technologically, digitally, we can upload our brains or file organization into a quote unquote hard drive or into a global computer or a network. So literally it's redefining this proposition is redefining who I am and eliminating the necessity of a body. It's called whole brain emulation or mind uploading. Again, uploading the brain's file organization into a hard drive or a global computer or a digital network of some kind. And then once that is achieved, the beautiful proposition according to transhumanism is now I am me in this form that can be downloaded again. So I'm uploaded and now I can be downloaded into a variety of delivery systems that might include like a cyborg or a cybernetics construct, like a robot with my consciousness in it. It could be that I can be downloaded, my consciousness, my whole brain emulation. Literally, the definition for transhumanist is this is who I am. So my identity lives without any need for the physical body I was given. And I can be downloaded at will into a variety of mechanisms or delivery systems that are still my identity. And so that's really where it kind of goes off the rails, ironically, because I'm not sure any of us could grasp the concept and own the concept that I don't need a body to be a human. And if you look at this from a biblical worldview perspective, we are bodily containers of God's image. Our body is significant to our identity. It's essential to our identity. And as we'll look at it in a minute, when we look at this through the Pinocchio Project's mission, look at this idea of transhumanism, we'll see that my body is necessary not just now, but for my actual future. See, transhumanism predicts a future where I can quote unquote live forever in a much better format if I can just separate my mind and my consciousness, my whole brain emulation, into a system or a delivery vehicle that won't die. It has no organic deterioration But from a biblical perspective, that's actually takes me out of the realm of humanity. I am no longer living as a human being if that's my posture as just simply a mind or a consciousness. Now, you may be thinking, man, what kind of science fiction books have you been reading? I've just been reading snippets, excerpts from science journals, from philosophical, technological journals. And this is actually hot. It's being funded to the hundreds of millions of dollars. And there's a sense of urgency, which also proves the irony of an atheistic worldview that will not include God as a possibility, proving that the image of God still lives in these people, because the desperation to quote unquote cheat death or to gain longevity and well-being beyond the erosion of the physical body is in high acceleration, and that's something only image bearers think about. And animals, the animal kingdom, they don't think about their impending demise physically. So, along with this need to either have medical advances that are gained through science and technology that eradicates aging, or eradicate aging altogether by removing the physical body from the picture, there are three, if you look across the spectrum of transhumanist ideas, the three powers that transhumanism promises to invest humans with. There's three powers that improve our lives in whatever forms we will be uploaded to and then downloaded to. The first is super longevity. So, beyond the current capacities of this natural body to sustain itself. Then super intelligence, a way now to tap into much more information, knowledge, and I would say lacking wisdom, but a lot more accelerated capacities for our mind in their current state. And then obviously, or it should be obvious, this other power is just super well-being, no longer worried about any of the dysfunctions, diseases, or injuries to a natural or physical body. And you might be saying to yourself, wow, that sounds so interesting. I might want to take advantage of that. I mean, when's all this going to be possible? Well, it's not really even possible now. AI, artificial intelligence, is being developed. We have technology that's coming alongside. We have cybernetics that's creating functional robotic arms. But really, this whole integration of either eliminating aging through medicine or uploading our minds, whole brain emulation, it's still decades, if not hundreds of years away, according to the transhumanists. So this is what a lot of transhumanists are considering while we wait. Literally, when the body gives out physically, just to freeze it. It's called cryogenics, and it preserves, at least from a tissue perspective, an organ tissue perspective, it preserves the brain. And so this is sort of the next storage possibility for the human brain that's awaiting the advancement and then perfection of these transhumanist practical expressions. So there is a fear out there, and it's not what you think, maybe. There's obviously ethical considerations here, and typically ethics are outrun by the possibility, meaning typically when you see advancements in science and technology, you'll see the actual practice of that science and technology run far ahead of the ethical considerations of employing that science and technology. I guess the expression of excitement is kind of like this: hey, we can do it, and since we can do it, we should do it, or we must do it. And you see that in all kinds of developments across the framework, especially of the 20th and 21st century. Advancements in quote unquote reproductive control. You see what it means for us to, unfortunately, I'm going back to the trans and the other context conversation. We see that we can affirm someone's psychological self and their identity regardless of the biology through advanced surgical techniques and medicines like puberty blockers. And typically the practice outruns the ethical considerations. And we would say from a biblical worldview, the ethical consideration should always come first, well thought out, deliberated, while the practice waits on the sideline for the ethical considerations to put guardrails around what the practice might look like. But that almost never happens. It's, again, since we can do it, we should do it, or even we must do it. And while that should be an ethical consideration for transhumanism as to just the practice on its own without any other considerations, the biggest fear here for transhumanists is that the whole brain emulation of human beings will be subjugated or taken into slavery as technologies developed in AI and the artificial intelligence and the technological advancement coming together with AI produces something called singularity. And in singularity, artificial intelligence now develops or it is born into the artificial intelligence unit a capacity to learn on its own in a way that it not just supplants human intelligence, but it actually subjugates humanity. So the picture here is that humanity is now under the domination of an artificially intelligent set of mechanisms. That's called singularity. And it's, if you look around, you'll see more and more movies coming out that are hinting at transhumanism and singularity. And the reason for that is that the ideology is taking more and more center stage, and the hopeful possibilities are receiving more and more attention and more funding. So let's look at this from the mission of the Pinocchio Project. Our mission is to examine everyday ideas, and this is becoming an everyday idea, at least in the laboratories, in the academies, in the institutions. We take everyday ideas that promise human flourishing, and we examine them through a biblical grid to determine whether or not they can deliver on their promises. So what I want to do is I want to talk about end-of-life issues as well, end of the natural life, and then a look to the future. And if you'll allow me, we actually also have a superior humanity proposition as Christians, superior to our current state. And it doesn't excuse or dispel or discard the need for a body. It actually highlights the place of the body in our future. And so I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians 15. If you know 1 Corinthians 15 at all, the whole chapter, the whole section of the letter is wrapped around what it means to be confident in the fact that Jesus Christ is resurrected from the dead and has his own resurrection body. And we just came out of Easter, where we see Jesus was crucified bodily, and then after 3 days he was resurrected bodily. And the New Testament writers, particularly Paul, addressed really bad teaching in the early church that claimed that Jesus was not God in the body. He only appeared to be in the body because God would not allow himself to come in a body and then be crucified. But Paul and in other places in the New Testament want to assure the early church, want to assure the believers that it's absolutely necessary, as Paul says in Colossians, that in Christ all the fullness of the Godhead is embodied, lives in bodily form. And that's in chapter 1 of Colossians. In chapter 2, Paul refreshes that idea when he says that Jesus was crucified in his flesh. That means in his body, he took all the penalties of our sin and then forensically or legally canceled the charge against us in his own body. And so this is a really important concept. And when you consider all of the now advancements in thinking about what it means to be human, we need to strain back to these baseline understandings of applying the biblical text to these ideas and ask ourselves again, what does true human flourishing look like? Well, here, true human flourishing looks like understanding the place of the body, the physical body, in our present life and in the beautiful life to come. So Paul talks about the reality of the resurrection in this part of his letter to the Corinthian church. And then he assumes a question that comes to their minds. And in 1 Corinthians 15, in verse 35, I'm going to be moving around, but I'll move from 35 down. Paul says to the church, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? Like, what does it mean? What does the resurrection look like? With what kind of body will they come? And then Paul responds like this, how foolish. What you sow or what you plant does not come to life unless it dies. So unless you put a seed into the ground and the seed has died, Jesus said this about his own life, unless a single seed falls to the ground and dies, it cannot bear fruit. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps a seed of wheat or of something else. But God then gives it a body as he has determined, and to each kind of seed he gives its own body. And then just a couple of verses down, so it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body, just think about, you might want to look at this text yourself and see how many times the body is referenced and how critical, vital, and inseparable the body is from everything about me. This is what it means to be human now and what it means to be a child in the kingdom when God wraps all things up. So it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable. That's our living bodies. When it's put into the ground, it's the imagery of burial. It's perishable, meaning it will erode, it will decay. But it is raised, it is resurrected now imperishable. It will not perish. It is sown in dishonor. That means I'm still living in the flesh. I still have a sin nature, even as I also have the spirit. But it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, and it's raised in resurrection power. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead will raise us from the dead. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. And Paul summarizes like this: if there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So contra the idea of transhumanism's definition of what it means to be human, that it's okay or even preferable to separate the body from the consciousness, the mind, the whole brain emulation. Paul reminds us of the beautiful design that we've been given in our natural state, and then also the promise of the reality of our spiritual body when we are resurrected from the dead. And so a biblical worldview categorically denies this definition of what it means to be human, as the transhumanists are proposing at the current moment. And so Paul goes on in verse 45 of 1 Corinthians 15, the first Adam became a living spirit or a breath, a nephesh. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, Genesis 2. The second man is of heaven, and you know the Gospels, and particularly if you reminded in Philippians chapter 2, Jesus didn't consider equality with God in heaven as something to be grasped, but came to earth. The first man was dust of the earth, the second man is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of earth. And as is the heavenly man, so are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, that means our substance is of this natural body, so we shall also bear the substance of the heavenly man, or the heavenly body. So this is the continuity of bodily existence from my natural self into my natural death, and then upon my resurrection, the gaining of my spiritual body, that it can be argued legitimately from the New Testament, will look a lot like me in whatever form, but imperishable. What is sown imperishable, which I'm perishing right now by the minute. It's just the natural processes. And this is what the transhumanists want to erase or do away with the body altogether, so it doesn't have to be considered. But this is part of the process of me receiving all the promises of God in my faith. So important to keep in mind. And so the irony of the ultimate irony, when I say ultimate, I mean because it has to do with death. The ultimate irony of transhumanism is that brilliant people who deny transcendence show themselves to be image bearers still by their desire to sustain and provide longevity for their own lives. I mean, one of the baseline tenets of atheism is that when all these processes give out, we are done. It's just fade to black. And we, as atheists, should be okay with that. We don't need a heaven. But these very precepts of transhumanism prove that they deny that satisfaction with just having this life and fade to black with no need for something next that's more improved and more enhanced, because this is the whole mission of transhumanism. That's the ultimate irony here. And this should give us hope when we're talking to people who hold what they would say is an evolutionary or atheistic worldview commitment about what it means to be human. And anyone who says that they're okay with just living in this time and making the most of it, and then are perfectly satisfied with lights out and fade to black, there's something in them that is denying that even as they say it. And that is the image of God in them. Ecclesiastes 3 says that God has placed eternity into every one of our fabrics, every one of it's our heart, it's our soul, it's the deepest dynamo of what makes us who we are. We all have this yearning to reach for the longer permanent life. And even though an atheist would deny that yearning is for the transcendent, it's transcendence that they're looking for, to transcend all the limitations of this life at any cost, except for the cost, unfortunately, of acknowledging the one who gives life and gives eternal life. So this should give you hope that the illogical position of transhumanism opens up the one holding these positions to questions, if you have a relationship there. So I know this might have been a little confusing because you might not have heard too much about this, but I can promise you'll hear more about it in the weeks, months, and years to come, because image bearers are always seeking to transcend. What our mission is to introduce them to the transcendent one, who has already made arrangements for the natural, perishable becoming spiritual and imperishable. There's hope there, friends. For the Pinocchio Project, Mitch Friedman signing off.